There's nothing like veiled threats from mad dictators to get the global blood boiling and to get the attention of slow-footed governments. Russian leader Vladimir Putin knew exactly what he was doing in noting that a war with Ukraine would be apocalyptic. But of course, quick to hope it never happens. Let's discern what the reality on the ground is for those who would be first affected. Welcome back to Midpoint. Author, correspondent, and our man on a suitcase as he travels the globe and winds up in some interesting places. This time in Kiev, Ukraine. Todd Wood joins us today. Todd, how are you?
Ed, really good to be back. Thank you.
Pleasure to see you again. How are things on the ground in Ukraine? Quiet, at least for the time being, at least in Kiev?
Yeah, Kiev's very quiet, and things are somewhat normal, although the currency's, falling through the floor. But the really that I see is that, Russia, people here are worried about Russia trying to cement a land bridge down to Crimea. And that the thing that's standing in their way is the town called Mariupol, which is a town of about 500,000 people on the port. And they've shelled it once, but if they do attack that town, that'll be a whole new escalation in the war. They cannot supply Crimea right now via land, so they have to do everything over the water, and it's very expensive and time-consuming. So they'd love to have a way to basically take an edge along the coast all the way to the Crimean Peninsula.
Is there any doubt in your mind whatsoever from what you hear in the people that you talk to that in this so-called ceasefire time that Russia is using the time to rearm, move their vehicles around, maintain their vehicles, and simply solidify their position?
That's what the fear is. The separatists have said that they're moving their heavy weapons back out of, per the Minsk agreement. There's a lot of skepticism about that here. The Ukrainian troops are still being shot at. So, Ukraine has said, we're not moving our artillery until we stop getting shot at, which is understandable, of course. So there's a lot of skepticism. What happened in Debaltseve, where they basically killed several hundred Ukrainian troops who were trying to get out of town, forced surrender, really, I guess, stirred the pot here. And so people are worried about what's to come next after they've had a chance to regroup.
Is the feeling among Ukrainians that the world has basically forgotten them and basically just tossed them aside?
Well, I think there's still hope here. The UK said today they're sending 75 advisors into Ukraine to train the Ukrainian army. They said they would follow the United States lead as far as lethal weapons to the Ukrainian forces. There is talk of removing Russia from the SWIFT system, which will really be a death blow to their banking system, which is the international payment system between banks. That would really get Russia's attention, I think. But we're not to that point yet. But, there are some glimmers of hope that they see. But, they're getting slaughtered really out west. They're overgunned, or out east, and they're overmanned. And, it remains to be seen what's going to happen.
Are there pretty much pictures every day on television and people are talking about it? I mean, I hear from people who've been there that it's constantly pictures of bodies in the streets.
Well, that is true. And the same in Moscow. It's constant propaganda against the West, against America. And, the Russian population is really, worked up over this right now. Putin is a master of escalation and de-escalation, and he escalated, took additional land. Now he's backing off, says there's no need to be in a war with Ukraine. Well, they are in a war with Ukraine. And so, does he just push, come back a little bit so that the West relaxes and then starts a new push for more land? I mean, that's the fear.
Isn't it now possible that what Putin has done in many ways is he has galvanized the people in their hate of Russia at this point?
Yes. I arrived at the airport recently in Kiev, and there are Ukrainian troops basically asking for money in the lobby, trying to support the army. The army's really funded, some by the government, but also by the oligarchs here. And so they are, a lot of the battalions are volunteer forces. And yes, I would say the level of hatred is real.
I got about 40 seconds left here. Is the bigger issue the fact that they want the Americans to come in and the British to come in and help, or they would want their own government to clean it out and get rid of the corruption?
Well, that is the real, I listened to briefings today here in the Ukraine Crisis Center, and there is a real anger from the troops out east and from the Maidan protesters who forced a revolution a year ago. It's a year, we just had the anniversary of the 1 year point where the 104 guys and girls were shot by snipers. And so there's a real anger toward the government that they haven't pushed the reforms through. Nobody's been charged for those deaths. there's still a ton of corruption in the Ukrainian economy, and that's what the EU and the IMF are worried about too. We keep pouring money into a system that really is not functioning well.
Land that many people do seem to have abandoned in many ways. Todd, it's always a pleasure to have you on the show, my friend. Please stay safe on your travels, and we'll look forward to talking to you again real soon.
All right, Ed, thanks very much.
All right, take care. American kids lack the motivation to seek out a solid education, some say. So the slots are going to immigrants, sometimes illegals. That's next.